How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today in the pod, we're going to be talking with Kenny Withrow. He is a contract photographer and videographer with Ironman and also is the owner of No Coast Visuals. He's a creative, also loves triathlon. We talk about a lot of things in the triathlon space, in the artistic space, but we also dive into some super deep topics relating to relationships, sex. We talk about just personal growth and development, self-awareness, vulnerability, a lot of really good things. It's a longer conversation, but it's really one that I have enjoyed. So I hope that you enjoy it. I will say my brain is a little bit scattered because I'm getting ready to move to California here in about a week or so. And so things are just a little wild right now. So you might notice that in some of my questions and things seem a little bit scattered. But yeah, just thought I would let you guys know that, but I think it's a really great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Kenny Withrow. Really quick before we get back to the show, just wanted to say that we have episode 100 coming up. I can't even believe that. And we are going to do things a little bit different for that episode. I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to interview me and ask me some questions. So if you have some questions you would be interested in asking, you can check the show notes link in the description. It will take you to a Google form where you can add any and all and as many questions as you would like to. I will compile a list and hopefully go through as many of those questions as I can for that episode. So if you're interested in that, check out the link. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy today's show. That's a cool hat, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. Incognito a bit.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Sweet. All right, we'll start again. Yeah, so we're back. The question I was asking, I actually kind of forgot, but it had to do with your twin. So I was just trying to get at, as you guys have grown up, I guess, in like, you have different interests. It sounds like you went more of the triathlon photography route. What is he doing in relation to what you're doing? Like, is there any overlap?
No, not so much anymore. He was more of the bookworm. He actually studied in school.
Yeah.
I did not. I was more focused on sports and trying to get outside and just get away from homework. So yeah. He studied CAD design. So he does marketing for a pretty big like plumbing company here in town that he's been with for, gosh, I want to say almost 15 years now.
Wow.
He's kind of like my dad. He just stays on one path and stays in his routine and goes. And I'm just more, the artist, the creative. That's just like, oh, what's that shiny object? What's that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we played sports when we were young, but definitely now it's kind of like split to where I'm still, looking at shiny objects and, I'll just go over there. So just being the artist.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of artisticness, at what age did you realize that you were like into that stuff in terms of like drawing or making a film or whatever it was?
Yeah. When we were younger, my brother was drawing a lot and he was doing some really cool, like, artistic stuff with, drawings, and he kind of got me into that. So I was drawing like I would like mimic cartoons and stuff and just draw. And at one point I was like, oh, I'm going to be an artist, of like a cartoon artist. And but stepped away because of sports. I was just always into sports. And then it was probably like 2013, 2014 when I really picked up my first camera, which was a GoPro. And I was racing at the time and I started filming myself. And that's kind of where it started, at least with the camera side of things.
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like your dad and your brother are more similar, like you were saying, in their very, I don't want to say one track mind, but the ability to like dig that route and like, we're going this direction. For you, it's obviously different. Is that more of your mom's side of life, like how she operated?
Oh, yeah. My mom's always digging into something new. She's always creating, like, right now she's into like jewelry. So she's creating like jewelry from like petrified wood. They'll go hiking. Oh, that's so cool. And she's like looking at rocks and picking up rocks and then tumbling them. And but she's always making something new. Every time I go over there, it's like she's in something new, and that's kind of how I am too, is like, especially coming the off season, which is coming up here soon after Kona, is I know my mind will start to wander and I'll start venturing into new creative ideas. Usually it's around a camera, but it's definitely far from filming athletes or subjects.
So what is your very first interaction with triathlon? I think you said it was during college.
Yeah. So this was like probably 2008, I'd say.
Okay.
I joined the cycling team at Colorado Mesa, and I don't know, I think my parents did triathlons when they were younger, and I always told myself I was going to do an Ironman one day. And so cycling just pretty quickly got me into doing triathlon. And I think I did my first triathlon in 2008 and kind of got hooked like everybody else from there. And yeah, I just went all in on triathlon.
Yeah. So for me, when I first started doing triathlon, or even just cycling in general, like it was very difficult. Go on a group ride, you're falling on people, don't know how to unclip. I'm sure you've experienced us getting dropped at the back of the group, maybe in the beginning, maybe not. You sound like you did more sports than me when I was a kid. But I'm curious, as you went through this journey, as you've gone and continued to pursue competing, I guess, what are some of the life lessons that you have learned that have sort of overlapped from triathlon and maybe other areas of your life?
Yeah, I think for me, because when I first started, I was the slowest kid on the sports team. And so I taught myself how to swim, taught myself, how to bike, how to run. And I always knew that the longevity of how long you stick with something, you're going to outlast the field. So like the longer you stick with something, the longer you stay with your craft, I think you'll outlast the competition. That was always my goal, is I knew I wasn't the fastest or best, but if I keep at it year after year, others will fall off. So it's the dedication from what I put in triathlon, and the discipline is what I try to apply into my current life. Is just, I don't consider myself the best photographer, videographer, but I know kind of what we were talking about earlier is you're always learning something, especially with this, because it's always evolving. So the more you stick with it, the longer you're going to last. So
I was going to say, I think that the one reason why triathlon was so attractive to me was, so growing up, I think I'm similar to you in that, like, I tried some other sports, but very creative, always kind of jumping to some new thing. Whenever I want to do something new, like 110,000%, go in just like head on. You want to try these new things and see what's going on. But triathlon challenged me in a new way because, I guess, kind of twofold. It taught me, like, okay, this is something that I truly can have control of. So that was, probably a little bit of an insecurity there, like trying to exercise control in all things. And this is the one thing that I felt like I could control to the max. But another part of it was, okay, if I'm going to do this thing, I mean, it is quote unquote an endurance sport, but I think living a lifestyle of an endurance athlete, whether you're professional or age group or whatever, like, it takes a lot of commitment. And it was almost like a test to myself to see how long I could, long-term, year over year, pursue something. Because college was the first thing I ever really completed. And the only reason I completed it was because my wife, a girlfriend at the time, she was like, you have to finish. She was like, this is stupid. Why am I here? Like, I'm paying these people lots of money to teach me what I'm already doing. Because I started a business in college and I feel like I was teaching them, which is, there's a little ego there. But triathlon, like, really challenged that piece of me, I think, to, like, okay, is this something I can stick with to see marginal gains over year?
Yeah, it's a good point on control too, because I played, my first love was baseball, and so I thought, like any American, pro baseball player was the goal. And I played 2 years of college baseball, and it was when I stepped into triathlon in that individual sport, I felt like I was in control of how good I could be. It wasn't a coach in control of my playing time, their subjective view of how good I was, So yeah, just triathlon was that thing of like, you're in control and you're only going to be as good as you want to be, really.
Yeah.
So, and I really enjoyed that. Just that separation of like, oh, this is all on me now.
Yeah.
It's not sitting there waiting for playing time and hoping for playing time. Is like, well, if you want to play, you have to go out and practice on your own and make it your own.
Do you miss baseball?
Not so much anymore. No,
it's gone.
I'll tune in every once. Yeah, I'll tune in every once in a while, like at the beginning of the season and then playoffs. But I think it's a slow, boring sport, and I think they need to change a lot of things to make it faster and more appealing. But I really don't pay much attention to it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I know that I don't either, but I know that they recently added that countdown clock. I know that's been speeding some things up a little bit. But yeah, it's such an interesting, it's a different kind of a sport. And people are going to probably hate me for saying this, but it seems like the only sport that you can be cardiovascularly not so great of fitness to do well at. I don't ever play baseball, can you tell? But
yeah, it is funny to see, like, you see rookies coming to the sport and they're super lean and just like fit, muscular, and then 5 or 10 years down the road, you look at them, they're just like, they got more weight on them. They're not as like lean anymore. And they're running to first base. They're out of breath, but not knocking any baseball players, but
yeah, for sure. No, it's interesting for sure. So as you jumped into the triathlon space, forgive me, I'm not as familiar with like what your personal aspirations were. So when you first got into it, what were your goals, and like how have those shifted over time in line with the career path that you've chosen and that you continue to pursue, and then also just as sport?
So jumping in triathlon was just getting hooked on, again, just individual sport, kind of is more of just like, what can I do in the sport? And just like, it was just fun. And then eventually I realized, I was like, oh, I'm actually not so bad at this. Like, maybe I can make something of this. And I did have goals of like going pro one day, winning an Ironman. Like I had a list of like, oh, this is what I want to accomplish. Yeah. But as an amateur, my first goal was like, okay, of course, like many amateurs, Kona. I want to race Kona. Yeah. I want to win age group. And I eventually, 2014, I raced Kona, qualified in Boulder here, and raced Kona. And then it was in Kona, I'll never forget. It was like mile 18 or 20. I hit the wall just like anybody does in a marathon. And I remember running on the Queen K, back on the Queen K. And I was just like not enjoying myself, suffering. And I was just like looking around. I'm like, I'm at the World Championships and I'm not enjoying this. I was like, I think I kind of took that too personal, because I was like, I don't know if I enjoy this anymore. Wow. I feel like I've done it. And so I always say I raced Kona and I retired. But I was just so like, I was working a part-time job. I was giving it my all just to be at that level to compete. And it was just kind of mentally draining and physically draining. And after the race, I was just like, man, I'm so drained. Like, I don't know if I was like, I could have stepped up to get a pro card at the time. But I kind of looked back and I was like, I was 29 at the time. And I was like, I don't know if I want to live this lifestyle. If I jump up to a pro level, if I want to be a bottom feeder pro and just continue to sacrifice time and this commitment. And a part of me was like, what else am I giving up in life? And what am I missing? So that's kind of when I stepped away and was like, all right, I need to take a step back and just kind of see what else is out there. But I built really good relationships with a lot of athletes, friends, and some of the professionals that were just coming into the sport, and stepped away for about, I don't know, probably like 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And was just kind of like, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the court, time to get a real job, an RJ. And I was like, okay, I'll get the corporate life. I was working at Newton Running at the time. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to try and work in the marketing side of things, try and go corporate.
Yeah.
And I tried that for a little bit. So I stepped up from just a retail job working in the lab to now working in marketing. And I realized quickly, I was like, oh, sitting at a desk, answering phone calls. I was like, this is not for me. So I kind of hopped around a bit, worked at Lululemon for about 4 years. And then I was also managing Airbnbs during that time.
Okay. Doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, just figuring it out and just trying to figure out self identity as well of who I wanted to be. Because, you know, I think we all go through it sometime in life is you have this identity of being an athlete your whole life in some form or way, especially when you're competing at a certain level. And when you stop, you kind of stop and you have nothing. You're like, okay, what's next? Who am I? You know, how do I define myself besides just race results? You know, who am I beyond that? And I kind of went through some dark periods of just figuring myself out, and it came full circle. And I appreciate those times because I learned so much about myself and so much about life and what's important. And then, again, slowly picked up the camera again, friends still competing. So I would just go out and take photos at local races here in Boulder and just send out photos to them, send out photos to the pros racing. And that eventually snowballed to where I'm at now.
Yeah. So let me pause for a second. There's a couple of questions that I have, or I think 2 or 3 of them actually. First off, when you're making this shift, so you said you had these goals of like you wanted to go to Kona and, you know, win a world championship, be a professional athlete. To a degree, you got that. Like you said, you could have taken your pro card. You got to Kona, maybe not necessarily as the world championship that you wanted, but from my experience, when I've had big goals that I've set out to and I was like married to them, and then over time, like you said, you start to realize that you're going for it, or at least I figured out that I was going for the goal for the sake of the goal rather than the journey. And so you just realize like, oh, maybe this goal is not something I want anymore. But being able to like say that verbally is not an easy thing to do because it's like you're letting yourself down. At least that's been my experience. And it's like really painful, although it can be like a death and a rebirth kind of a situation. So talk to me about that death and rebirth for you, because what did it take to be that honest with yourself to say like, I'm going to step back?
It took a lot. I mean, so 2014, I did Konas. Then I took 2015 off of racing. Didn't do any, just kind of like, again, try to find a new path. Still had that itch, still had the ego, I call it. The ego of being like, you want to be the best, like in the world, like this is who you are. So in 2016, I came back and started racing again and was like, all right, I'm going to race Kona just to show myself and those around me that wasn't a fluke, that this is who I am. And then raced Ironman Boulder here again to qualify. And pretty much from the start of the race, just stomach was just bogged up with, I just couldn't put any nutrition down. So I ended up DNFing at like mile 18. Again, it's at mile 18 of the run. And that's where I felt like I felt like I let a lot of people down because it was my hometown race. Parents were out there, family was out there, like friends, everyone knew. And I just like, I couldn't go anymore. And I felt like I walked away from the race, and walking away, I was like, wow, I felt like so many people supported me in this journey that is in many ways selfish, because what are they getting out of it? You know, like they're out there to support, they've sacrificed, you know, time with me to support me. And that was kind of that was like the punch in the face of like, whoa, this isn't the life I want to live. I don't want people. I just felt like, again, like I just disappointed people. And so that's where I truly took a step back and was like, okay, how can I now like give back in a way, you know? So yeah, so that's kind of where I went into the shadows in
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
way. Yep.
yeah. So whenever you said a minute ago, like, it's a selfish sport in a lot of ways. I would agree. I mean, I cannot think of any other sport where maybe golf, where you can spend so much on yourself to like have such marginal gains. So there's that part of it. And then it does take a lot of time, sacrifices from relationships, even potentially. However, I've been a part of that, and I'm kind of going through a little bit, I think, of what you're going through right now, or what you went through. I'm going through right now, where I'm kind of questioning because I was like, oh, I want to get my pro card, and I'm not as talented, so it's taken a lot more than I thought it would, and I'm kind of questioning a lot of these things. But last night I went to my best friend's house to go hang out. He's got two young kids now, and like he's in a totally different world, and we just were able to take an hour apart, just from life, and just go hit some golf balls in his simulator, and like talk the bro stuff. But when I came back up stairs, his mom was there because they just had a newborn baby, so she's helping take care of stuff, and she's this sweet Romanian lady. Her name's Lydia, and I love Lydia so much because she's just so kind. And anyway, as I was telling her goodbye, she said in this Romanian accent, which I cannot repeat basically, but she's like, I watch you online. Just want you to know, like when you run, I think I need to go running. And when I run, I think of you running and it helps me go farther. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting because, I post a lot of stuff on Instagram and a lot of professional athletes post a lot of stuff. And I think that sometimes there isn't enough positive feedback to see like how positively that doesn't affect people, because there's a line when things can be extreme, and I think this sport's a little extreme in a lot of ways, but to know that like you're still inspiring people. So I guess my question is like, do you feel that do you have a positive view on that segment of your life when you were doing those things still, and like how it affected other people other than just like it made you feel kind of down?
Yeah, I would say what comes. I mean, my mom was always proud of me. I mean, my parents were, both of them were very proud of
Yeah.
me. So that was definitely kind of like, okay, yeah, they're happy. I mean, they've always been proud of me, but I think inspiring them a bit. But I feel like it's changed a little bit since then, because now, like, social media was back then, which is, it's hard to say back then, which was 2014, 16.
Yeah.
It's crazy to say that,
Time
but
flies, dude. It's crazy. Yeah.
yeah. But just with social media, because social media was really just starting to tick off,
Hmm.
and we can dive in this later, but just like I feel like a lot of athletes still weren't posting much, especially the professionals. They weren't sharing, they weren't posting much. Like you could go and find you know, blog posts here and there of races. But now, we're constantly bombarded with content. And I
Mm.
think it can be a detriment at times, but I think you can find a lot more inspiration now by posting your accomplishments and
Mm.
lifestyle now. But back then, because social media wasn't as big, I felt like it was just kind of like you were just in your own little cave,
Yeah.
for the most part. So yeah, I'm sure I inspired some people back then, but I don't know if it's to the degree that it would be now,
Yeah.
just because of social media and what people see
Yeah.
online.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I haven't been involved in it that long, so that's an interesting perspective. I'll have
Yeah.
to chew on that one. But so another point of that I'd love to draw on is you were talking a little bit about like self identity and the crisis you had with yourself because sport has been a part of it for so long. Who is Kenny now?
Oh, Kenny now is more, I'd say, just more open, more caring, more giving. Um, I think I see the world much differently than I did 10 years ago.
How
I
so?
see a lot more opportunity now in the world. So I know that, like, if triathlon were to stop tomorrow, if I wanted to quit, taking photos and video now, I know I'll find something new.
Mm.
I know that my identity is not tied to me being a photographer. I know I can create something new. I think back then it was just more like, oh, this is who I am. This is what everybody knows me as. Um, yeah, so I'd say now just definitely just more open and um, more open to opportunities and ideas.
Yeah.
So
How old are you?
39.
You're 39. Okay, nice. That's a good age. I'm 32.
Okay, that's a good
Yeah.
age too.
A lot of my actually really close friends, yeah, thanks. A lot of my really close friends are actually like 38 and 39. I enjoy hanging out with people a little bit older than me. I don't know why, just because maybe I feel like I need to be more mature. But um with what you're talking about, how do you detach, like how would you give advice to someone to detach their identity from what they do? Because I think especially in American culture, like the first thing we typically ask each other is like, "Oh, hi, like what's your name? Okay, what do you do?" And like in Japan, I was talking this on maybe it's a previous podcast with someone, but they ask like, "How's your family?" So like it just shows the very contrast and different of values, and like what we value in the U.S. is like our identity is our work. So
Mhm.
how you seem to have learned that lesson, like you have the piece that you could move on tomorrow and find something new because, and I feel like I've learned that lesson too. But how would you teach someone and give them advice to like detach themselves from that work identity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if I have like one statement or I don't know if I have one statement or quote for that, but I kind of fall back to a lot of the clients I work with are younger, so younger athletes, especially professionals. This is their life. This is their identity as they
Mm-hmm.
see it. But I feel like how I connect, and one of the goals of mine from stepping away from taking that step back from triathlon was starting to, yeah, as you said, get to know people beyond their time, beyond their accomplishments in the sport, and just kind of really know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few out there that's hard to crack because it's just like all they want to talk about is triathlon.
Yeah.
And for a while there, that's what I got burnt out of, was just conversations was like, oh, when's your next race? How's
Yeah.
training? And
Yeah.
we all do it. I still do it with a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people I talk to. Um, but I don't know. For me, I always try to just dig a little bit deeper of who they are, like,
Mm-hmm.
what makes them tick and what motivates them just to get up. I mean, a lot of athletes will say, oh, because I want to, be a world champion,
Sure.
and that's just who they are though. And
Yeah.
that's where they're at. That's where they're at in life. And I totally get that. But I also know deep down, like 10 years from now, all this will end. You'll have to retire. And what are you building on top of that?
Yeah.
Um, One example is Sky Monch, um, professional triathlete.
Mm-hmm.
Her background is not triathlon. I think she comes from, I think I might butcher this. Her background was, I think she was a CPA or finance
Okay.
before triathlon. But I talked to her one time and she kind of said the same thing. Oh, if triathlon ended tomorrow, I know exactly what I'd be doing. I'd just go back to being, a financial advisor. I might be making that up, but I think she's one person, and a few others that, because they didn't grow up in triathlon, they didn't start when they were like 17.
Mm-hmm.
They have kind of a bigger view of like, oh, there's
Yeah.
more to life out there
Yeah.
than just this. So that's a good question. I'm gonna have to think about that as a
Yeah. Yeah.
good quote.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. So it's interesting. Just kind of on the topic of what you're saying. From my observation, this is kind of anecdotal. We'll see if it's actually true, and I'd love for you to push back on it if you think it's complete trash. But I've noticed when it comes to world champions or very high performing athletes inside triathlon, outside triathlon, there's kind of two veins of people that are successful. On one side, there is the relentless lust after winning, and I want to be the best. And I think that that's oftentimes fueled by this insecurity of, I don't know who your dad was, your mom was, but clearly you weren't enough as a kid, but you figured out how to channel that energy to like be ruthless. And I've seen that in business a lot too. Like people are willing to lie, cheat, steal, whatever they need to do to get to the top. So that's like one vein. And then the other vein is like this, what I'm trying to figure out how to really tap into. It's like, don't take yourself too seriously, put in the work, but have peace about who you are before you even toe the line. If whether you go out and you win or whether you go out and you crash out or you just like you have nothing left, like that peace before the starting line, I think is what that settles the two differences. And I'm trying to figure out how to like nestle myself in that place to be at peace because I've been on both sides of that equation for multiple races, but being able to have the mindfulness and self-awareness to step up to a line of a race, and this is figurative speech, like it doesn't even have to be a race, and say like, okay, no matter what happens, I know who I am and I know who I want to be and where I want to grow. Like I don't know, it's like, but those are two very polar opposite things, but I think both of those mindsets can make a world champion. It's just after somebody becomes a world champion, somebody's going to sleep better. I think.
Yeah, totally. I think two things on that. It's like, I think the more comfortable you are in your own skin, I think the further you're going to get in life. And I mean life, not just business, sport, but just in life. Mm-hmm. And I think that does take time. I do think we have alter egos. So it's like, the ego of being the best at something and it's the warrior spirit. So when you're racing, I think embracing that warrior spirit to win, to be the best. But then once you're done racing, to embrace, the lover, to embrace the king, whoever that other ego is. I think if you're able to separate the two, I think you can have a healthier balance in life and relationships around you. But I think that just comes with time and that comes with life. Yeah, I think it just comes with time. So, and I always fall back to these, younger athletes I work with right now. They're just in their warrior spirit and they just want to be the best, which is totally fine. And I say, go for it. But I think at some point there's going to come a time where, you start to sit back and be like, okay, this is good, but it's getting in the way of everything else in life. So, what's the other ego? Not even ego, but just other facet of life that I can embrace and need to embrace to make everything else in my life successful.
Yeah. So what would you attribute to, it doesn't have to be one thing. It can be a barrage of things or maybe a group of people or one person. It doesn't really matter to me, but I'm curious to know where you have pulled in your sense of self-awareness and some of the wisdom that you shared, like having the internal peace. Like where do you draw on to find some of these, I guess, core values for life?
So when I took a step back from competing in triathlon, I really surround myself around just my friends that were outside the sport and just hanging out with them. So just, going to the bars, just going out, having fun. And just kind of seeing the lens through, their life in a way. And actually there was a while where I was actually getting into, and I still do it every once in a while, but for work, I will, I sometimes shoot festivals, like music festivals, but it's not the ones where you see on, the big EDM festivals where it's just a big party. Yeah. There's this festival down in Costa Rica that I go to every year, and it's in the middle of the jungle, so they build this festival out of bamboo. They build it all out of the forest. And it's I've learned a lot from this because I was down there for 2 months just living on a little cot in the jungle. And I just I was there to capture the build. So watch them build this festival just out of the ground. Yeah. And being around those people and just seeing them, one, disconnected from social media, disconnected from the internet, because we had very little, and just their views on life. I think a lot of people view them as, dirty hippies or wooks, as we call them. And wooks, yeah, which, granolas.
I haven't heard wook, so I got to get onto the modern times, but granola I've heard.
Yeah, wook. it's a type of hippie, I guess, new age hippie. But just kind of how they viewed life is, just being more open and caring to people around you, and just more open to conversations. Like they didn't ask the questions of like, oh, what do you do for work? Or, they didn't ask about triathlon. They didn't really know about it, so they didn't care. And so carrying conversations on just about just life in general. I learned a lot from them, and I still connect with a lot of those friends now. And it's just nice to break away because, I think the conversation is a little bit more deep, more personal, about self-growth and manifestation of, what you want in life and stuff like that. So it's hard because for a while there, I was trying to bring the two worlds together of like, how do I work with that, individuals who are just single-minded for the most part. They're on one path and one goal, to then having friends that are just kind of, living life in the moment. And, I kind of feed off both of those to kind of make me who I am today. So,
yeah. So, a question about that. So in my life, I'm going to try to go big picture with this and see if this analogy makes sense. But so with large language models, you're familiar with those, the AI systems that everyone uses nowadays. Are you familiar with how they train those systems? To a degree. I mean, like,
I think so. Is it just kind of by what people search and
it's so they take they take all the data, which is essentially everything that has been human made and written in text, and then it learns, basically how we communicate. And it's really good at essentially it's a conglomeration of each one of us really who has ever had an interaction with the internet. So I would say it's very similar for humans in that every word we say, every mannerism we hold, everything except for like maybe like the color of our exact skin tone and eye color and that stuff, like even that though it comes from the DNA, but we're all really tiny pieces of each other. But I think that for me, like as I've grown up, especially kind of after my dad passed when I was younger at 16, I became very aware of like, okay, I got to figure out where I find these missing pieces and who do I want to like fill in those pieces of who I am so I can kind of reach a level of maturity. So I became very like obsessive, almost to an unhealthy point of like, what things do I want to take and which things do I do not? So for you, it seems like you're similar and you're growing and you're seeing these perspectives, value systems, belief systems, and you take on ones that, I don't know, relate to you or whatnot. But like, I guess the question is, how do you know when you want to take on maybe a piece of that personality or the value or whatever it is? Like, how do you decipher between what things you do want to bring on, what things you just want to kind of leave out
from other people?
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah, I think we can all take something from everyone, just a little piece from everyone. I think you're always learning from someone of how they live their life and the values they carry. And for me, I think one of the reasons why I enjoy photography and videos, because the way I like to shoot is to document. So I don't like to superimpose any shots or anything. I'm very much just like run and gun, just fly on the wall. And with that, I become very observant. I'm already kind of an observant person. So I kind of like in a big group, I'm kind of the quiet one, usually always the quiet one sitting back, but I'm always like just reading the room and reading people and always trying to put myself in their shoes as well of like, why are they acting this way? Is it because of childhood trauma, or is it, what lessons did they learn? And the ones that I do like and enjoy, I do try to embrace those for the most part. So it's just being very observant of people. Sometimes too observant, I'd say. I read the room really well and I can read people pretty well. Cause I'm very much an empath.
Empath isn't like you give empathy. Is that what that means? Yeah.
Yep.
Do you ever find that exhausting to be so observant?
It's Yes.
Yeah.
I just
How do
had, yeah.
you keep the balance?
Um,
Or do you keep a balance? I guess is
I,
a better
it's no,
question.
I'm, it's something I'm trying to work on. I think what the balance is like, is not holding on to too much. Again, just kind of letting whatever energy's in the room, let the energy be, but you don't need to attach yourself to that energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, like I was just in Nice with Ironman. I was contracted out, so filming for them, and we have a big crew of videographers, super talented videographers and photographers that come out, and we work very closely with each other, and it's a lot of fun because we're always every minute of the day we're with each other for the most part,
Yeah.
working together, and there's a lot of emotions between us too because different stressors throughout the day, and we kind of all embody it in some ways because we care about each other. But I think for me, just kind of breaking away from it and having my own time to myself is probably the biggest kind of decompressor for me,
Mm.
to balance that out and kind of step away and be like, okay, I can't get attached. Don't get attached to those emotions of what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
They're just expressing it. So, I mean, I do find myself, because I'm empathic, like taking on a lot of the emotions, but um, yeah, sometimes you just kind of become numb to it. But
Yeah.
I just find myself being like, all right, I always joke. I'm like, all right, the friendship clock is expired. I'm
Yeah.
going to go take care of myself here, So
So you're pretty introverted. Like would you say that's your natural state then?
yeah, natural.
Yeah.
I could, I could be alone for, I could be alone for a week and be totally fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting because I used to be really extroverted growing up. As I've gotten older, I've become more introverted, but I swear it changes like on the day-to-day basis sometimes because like you were sharing, that's why I asked about the exhausting, overly observant. Like sometimes I think I'm just way too overly analytical and observant of something and it will just like it'll fry my brain to where like I'm running in circles and it's like, how do I turn this thing off? And then in other days, I have zero empathy. Like I'm trying to be empathetic. I'm thinking mostly in marriage because I think just we oftentimes treat those we love the worst. Sometimes like they see the worst sides of us. So that's what I'm thinking about. But yeah, at 32, like I thought it's just so interesting. Like I thought by this point in 30s, I kind of have it figured out because I remember when my mom turned 30 and she had me when she was relatively young, obviously. So it's just like such an interesting thing. But do you think that by the time we are 90 years old that we will have figured it out, or do you think we'll feel exactly the same?
I think we'll feel exactly the same, but I think we'll be able to manage it better the older we get. I think kind of how you kind of touched on it is, I think the older you get, there's some things you just don't allow or let affect you as a person. I think you'll always feel those feelings, but it's just at what degree. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, the older we get, I think it's just more like, all right. I think it's just understanding life because you've kind of been through it, right?
Yeah.
You know, 30 years is time, but it's not a lot of time for
Yeah.
hopefully how long we can live on this earth. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I think you get better at managing those emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I want to switch gears for a second
Yep.
and talk a little bit more about photography. So I had this experience one time, and I was riding my bike. I had a really long, hard bike ride. It felt terrible. Like I was just looking down at my wheel, groveling in the pain that I'm feeling, trying to get through this bike ride. And then years go by, and I can go out and put the same amount of power um, and doing the same efforts, but my perspective is so much wider. Like I can see so much further. I can enjoy the singing of the birds, like because of that fitness. I've never got into photography, but I would imagine because when I have picked up a camera and tried to take some kind of a shot, it's like there's a very limited number of shots that I could potentially take. My field of view or knowing how to use this camera is very small. Talk to me a little bit about as you have become more of a photographer, how your lens or your field of view and perspective on how to take pictures has changed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think
I'm not even sure those things really cross, but in my mind, they made sense for a half second there.
no, yeah, no, I think I know what you're throwing. Yeah, I think with anything, it's kind of when you first pick up anything, it's yeah, okay, so like photography, it's like, okay, you pick up a camera and at first you'll probably just set it to auto, right? Everything on auto just so you can learn the camera. So you're just taking classic shots. And then after a while you'll be like, oh wait, if I actually just if I slow the shutter speed on this while the athlete's moving, I can get that motion blur. So you're just like, okay, wow, that just unlocked something new. And they're like, okay, if I actually take a step back a little bit further, this is a totally different expansive view of not just the subject, running on a dirt road, but it's like they're running on a dirt road with the mountains behind them, And then it's like, oh wait, let me actually go in a little bit tighter to get the sweat coming off, their forehead or their back. And so I think it's just kind of like this zoom in and zoom out effect of anything. But again, that takes time. And for me, I'm still learning different shots and it's always trying different things. Like I was at a photo shoot this morning and we have the fall colors here, the leaves are changing color. So that adds a dynamic already. And then again, it's like, okay, let's play with the shadows a little bit more. So, how can we have the dark, the athlete standing just in this little pocket of sunlight, but have the shadows play where it's just like kind of a moody feel,
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, I think you answered it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think you answered it because I'm just trying to get at like some of these experiences I've had and like how they translate over to art. And it's always interesting to me because I like when I have tried to pick up a camera and take pictures, I know that I'm not very good at it, proficient because I haven't practiced it. And like similar with triathlon, the more you do something, just you gain a new level of understanding of how to manipulate your, I don't know, your tools or surroundings to capture a completely or have a completely new perspective. And like I've always enjoyed looking through like Nat Geo or That's When I Was Younger, or we had this book from 9/11, taking pictures of these very raw moments that people are experiencing, just a tremendous amount of emotion, but being able to capture that, it really does have a lot to do with it. I used to think that actually photographers didn't have much skill at all, but now the older I've gotten, just because of these other things I've experienced, I'm like, wow, you can really do a lot with a photo. You can do a lot, even more maybe with a video, but to be able to do a lot with a little is a skill that like I'm trying to figure out, like how do you make that work? Because there are some works I've seen where it's just like it hits you, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the emotions, right? The emotions of the photograph or the video. And I think because I've competed in the sport, specifically for the subject for triathlon, I know what to look for. So I know what emotions to look for. I know, like, again, going back to mile 18, hitting the wall on the marathon, it's a dark moment for everyone out there and everyone's experiencing it. So knowing that, like, okay, this is when the race is really starting this is when the race starts, and so the emotions are going to be very different from the athletes at mile 18 than it was at mile 3. Because at mile 3, they get on the run course and they're just like, there's smiles. They see us on the course and they're like interacting with us, talking. And then at mile 18 or 22, you'll see them and there's just like,
shell of a man or woman.
Yeah. And that's a moment to capture because you're actually showing how hard this sport is, and what they're going through. So I think having the eye to know what to look for in your specific sport or whatever you're trying to capture, I think that can bring out the emotion even more just into the photograph itself.
Yeah. So in terms of like taking those shots, you have like this very trained eye, you know what to look for. In our sport in general, what do you think could be done to like take it to the next level for the benefit of all humankind?
Oof. Wow. These aren't stupid questions.
Tongue in
Oh, wow.
cheek there.
That's good. That's a good question. I think it always comes down to the storytelling. So you have an athlete that's competing out there, for example, let's go back to Nice, what just happened in Nice. And let's say Laura Phillip, like she won. We all know she won the race. But full circle here, who is she beyond that? Like as an individual. And I think that's where you can really tell a story of like, what's her day-to-day look like to get to the spot, to get to be a world champion, and capturing those moments. I think that's where you can really tell a bigger story beyond, someone winning a race or, getting top in their age group. It's who are they beyond that finish line? And I think that's where you can really spread a bigger message.
Yeah. So what do you think that we can do as individuals in this sport to give space for that story to be told? Because what I'm thinking is like, it's really the reason why I'm doing the podcast that I have grown into this reason. Originally it was like, oh, I just want to like meet people and understand who they are. And it's grown more into not just for just triathlon, but that's my interest right now. But in everyone that I interview, I want to give them a platform to hopefully feel comfortable enough in this space to show a little bit of like who they are beyond why they are who they are. And so like, what can we do you think as individuals in this sport to give that space, to hold that space for those stories to be told? I don't know the answer to this. I'm glad I'm asking it and you're answering it.
I think you kind of answered it with just opening up more. I think, again, opening up more to then just being the athlete, like, again, go beyond just the results, go beyond just the time. Who are you, and if you are that athlete, I think opening up your space to allowing people to see who you are, and in the YouTube videos I make with these athletes, that's kind of the goal is, opening up their homes to, what their day-to-days look like so people can see that.
The YouTube videos, this is going to sound really stupid, so I'm glad it's on this podcast. But what specific videos? Because like you make videos with Ironman, or do you make your own stuff as well? And I know you have No Coast visuals, and like how does that all tie in if we wanted to see some of these videos that you've created?
Yeah, so with Ironman specifically, I'm contracted out with them, and so we create a YouTube series throughout the year that's called A Fighting Chance. And so we go to select races. So this year, for example, we went to all the Pro Series races, and we just kind of we film athletes leading up to the race, and then we film the race itself, and we create short little YouTube videos just kind of highlighting the race and highlighting certain athletes. And then what we're doing this year is now creating a little docu-series, so mini docs. And Ironman just released one. It's called Iron Will. And we did just that. We picked a subject, an athlete, and we would do home visits. So we'd go to their hometown and just kind of just hang out with them and capture their day-to-day and also tell a story of a certain race of them competing to be the world's best. And so we're doing that again this year. And so the doc will probably come out at the end of this year or early next year. Once Kona's finished. And then outside of that, I help create YouTube videos for certain athletes here in town. So like Trevor Foley, Gwen Jorgensen, this weekend going to Tucson for Sam Long. So I've helped build his YouTube channel. And then Taylor Knibb is another one. I've helped her social media. So for me, a lot of the stuff outside of Ironman is just helping. I create content for athletes. So their personal brands, I work with their sponsors to get content. So kind of just
So how did you make time for this podcast? That's what I really want to know. like, like I'm like,
It's
oh man, I need to let this guy go because he's probably got like 30 other things to do.
no, I've got 20 other things to do, but no. I had a photo shoot this morning, and then I don't know. It's just always something every hour,
Yeah.
but there's always time. There's always time.
Yeah. There is always time until there's no
Yeah.
more at all.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I do have a question. And we'll keep it just a few more and then I'll let you go. But with going into homes, do you know all of these athletes prior to going in their houses? I mean, I assume from this point, like you probably know a good deal of them, but do you ever have experiences where like this is one of like this is the first face-to-face interaction you're having with them? Does that ever happen? And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah. The majority of times I know the athletes
Yeah.
personally, which is nice. And I would say that's one of the reasons why Ironman has hired me, is because I was that bridge between Ironman and the athlete.
Yeah.
Because I have such good relationships with the athlete themselves, because I've worked with them before, or I just know them personally. They'll kind of use me and a few other videographers to bridge that gap, because
Yeah.
it just makes it's just more comfortable for the subject to know
Yeah.
who's coming to film them,
Yeah.
and who they work comfortably with. So that pays off big time.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you ever found yourself in any uncomfortable situations where like you had to, I don't know if finesse is the right word, but help that athlete feel like they're in a safe space to be themselves to get that footage. Because oftentimes it is very laid back and like you can tell that, they're pretty chill. But at other times, like you can also sense a little bit of like tension in the air. So like how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think there's been a few instances where I felt like I had to build trust with the athlete,
Mhm.
because there's a few athletes that just don't like the camera around. They're like, I don't know, I find myself boring, or they just don't
Yeah.
feel comfortable with the camera around. So yeah, I've definitely had to build like relationships, and I think with that, it's just kind of, when you come rolling in with the camera, I a lot of times don't have the camera with me or on me. I just start really just kind of diving in, just asking questions, and just,
Yeah.
making them feel comfortable with me, and just kind of, just kind of just get to know them, just like, you would with anybody else. And then eventually I'll bring out the camera and just kind of, and I'll let them know, like, okay, I'm going to start filming now, just like get some audio, get some video. And so it definitely takes time,
Yeah.
but I also don't force things right away too. So like when you step in a situation, again, it's just kind of like, just come in as a normal person, just like, as a friend, an ally.
Yeah.
And then just like start to get to business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I don't, not coaching. I forget what the word, courting. Like you really make sure like that because I feel like on some podcasts it's been difficult to like help that person to realize like, hey, I'm here. It's just me and you. Like I want to know who you are, because I think probably more times than not, especially with professional athletes across different sports and triathlon, of course, because that's interview a lot of. But I'll get in there like. I ask them, where are you from? And then within 3 minutes, we've graduated from them being born to world championships in a few weeks. So
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, let's go back. Like, I want to hear a little bit more of this. And sometimes there's a hesitancy for that. But I have found that like people like to, I think, expound and think internally, like when people ask good questions of like, yeah, like I haven't thought about that before. Because it's such a valuable thing for me or the person asking the question, but also for the person explaining that. Because I don't know, have you ever had the experience where you have a thought inside internally, or you have a direction that you're thinking about, and then it makes sense in your head, but then you're forced to verbalize that to someone else, and then you say it and it's like, oh wow, that's not at all how I thought. Like it's so interesting how words change the outcome of a thought.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like such a strange thing to me.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's something I struggle with. I mean, I had uh, dyslexia when I was younger, so it's like I do struggle putting putting my thoughts out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I do struggle with that a lot. And even with questions like asking athletes, I'm always like, oh, this is a good question. And then it comes out of my mouth. I'm like, oh,
That's not how I wanted it to go.
Yeah. I stuttered. I did all this. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to include my question into that. So I'll take that out and just get straight to the answer. But yeah, all the time.
Can I test a new question on you?
Yeah, please.
So how are you sleeping?
Oh, I'm sleeping great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sleeping really well.
That's good. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah. What's your next question?
Well, I was hoping you'd say not great, and then I could dive into that. But if you are sleeping great, what would you say to someone who's not sleeping great and they want to find good sleep?
Melatonin works, but don't take it all the time.
Yeah, I'm trying to disconnect from melatonin, actually. I'm asking this a little bit on my behalf.
Yeah. Yeah, take magnesium before bed. How to help? It's probably, I think it's shutting your brain off, right? I think, I could tell you a few things. I mean, here you go. If you can't sleep at night, get some of these blue blockers.
Oh, you are a believer.
Yep. I'm not sponsored, but I'll wear these at night. Even if I'm scrolling, I wear these. And actually we have like a red light here on our lamp. And then when it gets dark, when the sun sets, we have salt lamps. So we just keep the salt lamps on. So we have no like overhead light coming in.
Yeah, just keep it low.
Keep it low. And I put the blue blockers on if I'm watching, Netflix, YouTube, or scrolling. And I think that does help a lot. But the biggest thing is just kind of shutting your brain off, whatever that might be. I think we're always stressing and worried about something. I think every human is, as it's just natural. And so I think just trying to find how to shut that off, whether there's an outlet of like going out and exercising earlier in the day, so you're feeling a little bit tired. But yeah, those are my three little
tidbits on how to do it.
Yeah.
So
natural light.
Are you married, or you have a partner?
I have a girlfriend. Yep.
Okay, nice. How long have you been dating?
We've been dating for 3 years, almost 3 years now.
Okay, nice.
Yep.
Do you think that you would ever get married, or is that something you're like, we don't need it?
Yeah, I do think we'll get married for sure. Yeah. It's funny. My mom was making a joke the other day with Casey, my girlfriend, right there when we were hiking, and she's like, there was like a couple doing engagement photos in this beautiful spot up in the mountains, and she's like, "Oh my God, look at that! Did you guys see that? Look at that!" And I was like, "Okay, Mom. Yep, I hear you."
She's sending signals.
Loud and clear. Definitely. Marriage is definitely important for me. I was engaged before, so I've kind of been through it. So I've been through it, and that was kind of when I was going through some hard times, that was a part of it as well, is when I left triathlon. So, for me, I don't think a ring defines the relationship. I think it goes beyond the ring. It goes beyond the house. It goes beyond the kid. If you have kids, I think, that's just kind of how I view it. To me, a ring doesn't define the relationship. I think it goes much further than that.
Yeah. Can I ask what defines it for you? Like, what gives you that sense of like, this is the future? I'm asking some pretty tough questions now, so I apologize if it's a little too pointed, but yeah.
What defines it? I think, what defines it? I think it's just like finding that person in your life that's your best friend, that knows all your secrets, all your dark secrets. They know everything about you, but yet they still love you and they still accept you. And someone who's also willing to go through the ups and downs and not be there because you're tied by a piece of jewelry.
Yeah.
And
committed to
so
the person.
Yeah, I think there's a commitment before the ring that should be established besides just saying, oh, there's a ring, there's a piece of jewelry, now we're committed. It's like, no, we should feel committed before. And I'm not speaking to my relationship of like, being there yet, but I think overall that's kind of what defines it.
Yeah. I think something you said that really hit home for me or ring true is the not having secrets or like your partner knowing all of your secrets. Because like I've been married now for 7 years and a month. Or no, not a month, 6 months or something like that. Anyway, it was in June. You can do the math. But we've been married for 7 years. And my wife and I, so I've noticed for me personally, like whenever I have an internal struggle with something, it's an addiction or it's just something that I know to be like a vice and it's like holding me back. Whenever it's something that I have not put out there to the appropriate people, like it can just start to like grow within me and become this like nasty thing. So I think there's really something, especially in relationships, about sharing like what's going on upstairs. I think there's appropriate times when and when not to say things, and I'm learning that. But what I have found recently, and this might be kind of radical because I told one of my other friends about this and they're like, I don't know if I can do that. But being in a marriage relationship for me is like, it's 100% committed. I'm there, but I'm still human and I'm still going to be attracted to other women. And I think that it's very natural for my wife to be attracted to other men. And so for me, out of a place and knowing that like a lot of marriages fail usually because of like some level of infidelity, and there's other reasons, there's abuse, there's whatever, but for that reason I think is the one that would probably be like the highest on the risk factor for me. So like I actually go to my wife, and the first time is really hard, but like I went to my sister's, well, I actually won't say that because we might figure out, people might hear who it was, but there was this particular woman and I was attracted to her, and it was like eating me alive inside, because I couldn't, it was like almost like a infatuation thing. The wedding happened. I went and told my wife, and I was so surprised, and I hope that everybody can find this in their relationship. And but I told my wife, and she's like, "Oh, well, like she's so sweet and cute, and that totally makes sense." But thanks for telling me. And having that separation and telling her, like, it caused those, I don't know how you want to say it, like those flames to just dwindle and turn into nothing, because it's so interesting how we are wired. I do believe that like being married is a gift, and it's a thing like that, like being locked in on one relationship, to have that level of trust and commitment, I think adds a lot of value to life in general. But yeah, anyway, so now we kind of share that stuff back and forth. And in the beginning it was actually kind of hard, and it can cause it's a hard conversation to have, but I think it adds a lot of value. So anyway, I don't know why I decided to share that, but yeah.
No, I thank you for sharing that. I think that's awesome that you guys are at that level of sharing, because I think what you just touched on is so spot on, and one of the key pieces in a relationship is just that, because naturally we do find it's not like when you get married you're like, okay, blinders on, I think
I'm dead to the world.
I'm dead. I think so again, like me and my girlfriend, we just had a conversation like probably a month ago about the same thing of like, and we've had it before of just like, yeah, I know you're going to find someone else attractive. I'm going to find someone attractive. Like, I think that's just totally normal. But being able to share it is like, that's where I think the flame gets bigger with that,
Yeah.
And it's such a natural piece to us humans. And to kind of like, when you start to shut certain things out of your life, I feel like you start to like crave it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So being open about it and sharing it gives you that safe space. And I think the safe space is so important to have in a relationship and be able to share that. So, yeah. So thanks for sharing that. That was,
Can I, how much time do you have? Do you need to go?
No.
Okay, cool. So I want to share something. I was talking with my best friend last night, and I want to hear what your thoughts on this, but it hit me in the face, and it's something I've been kind of thinking about over the past years of just how, when it comes to like deep level relationships, marriage or not, whether you're committed to that person forever kind of a thing. So before I was married, something I think that most men and women will experience is like lust. Like, and I would have just learned to describe lust as like this flash in the pan, burns super hot, super quick, and then it's like gone. Um, just to be completely vulnerable for me with like the addiction of pornography and stuff, that usually like feeds that flame, and it was like boom, and it has a very set way of operating and feeling. And then when I got married, um, like when we did consummate our marriage for the first time, it had such a different tone and feel and like just overall afterwards feeling. Because for me, I assigned a lot of like shame, and I think rightfully so around that addiction. But then I didn't have shame after being married, and I think it's just so interesting because as we've been married longer, that part of our relationship, the very natural part that we all need, I think, to be like thriving human beings in good relationships, it's grown into this thing that it's like a different kind of flame. It's like started small, but it grows with time and it's become more of a beautiful thing. And like you're saying, or we were talking about, that level of vulnerability you have with that person, it's just like a deeper love that I don't think can be experienced anywhere else. But then like outside of it, still like I would say like the not good part of me still like yearns for that, but then like it's just this flash in the pan gone. So I didn't know that prior to marriage. I thought that all sexual experiences were the same. And I'm to the point now in our society where I'm questioning, I'm asking like how many people have actually experienced this other side of that, where it's not just where it's love versus lust type of a thing. And like I don't think it's that high. Anyway, just thought.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that high either. I think um I keep thinking about this quote of like, you know, when I heard it for the first time, I was like, whoa, it's like, when you make just life in general, it's like that lust. It's like lust doesn't have to just be with your partner or love. I think you can, or making love with your partner. It's making love with life itself, like go through life and make love with it in the sense of like, put your passion into that certain thing, so it's like directing your lust to and passion to your partner, or to the craft that you're creating now, like with this podcast and whatever else you do in life is like, take that energy and put that into what that might be.
Yeah.
Channeling it there,
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Still figuring all this stuff out. It's like, I don't know. It's fun to talk to you. I feel like you're just, 7 years older than me, so I'm kind of relating, like throwing these things out there and seeing like, okay, well, has Kenny experienced this? What is Kenny going through right now? So I appreciate you being the sounding board back and forth. I normally don't do this as much in the podcast conversations, but I thought it would be interesting. And
I thought it was great. And these are the conversations that I really enjoy. Is like going back to when we first part of our conversation was like just like having conversations like that and with people and with friends of like going deeper into who they are. And these are the conversations I really love because you get to have empathy for someone else of what they're really going through. Cause we all put on masks, throughout our day and life of like, oh, I have everything together. I've got the house, I've got the car, whatever you have in your life, but what's beyond the white picket fence.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of like going back to my friends who are, the festival, people who are working the festivals of like, these are the conversations I was having with them. And I was like, whoa, like you can actually have conversations with people like this, and really, and there's no judgment at all. It's just very open and caring and understanding too, whether they've experienced it or not. There's still an understanding of like, wow, I feel that. And maybe I didn't go through that certain, maybe I didn't go through that in my life, but I could still feel how that would be. So, so I appreciate, you opening up.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, it's interesting. I've been going through a lot of just mental turmoil later, just so everybody can know. Like, even though the podcast sometimes it might seem like I've got things together, I got pretty much nothing together at times. But so here recently, I've been thinking a lot about, because I have some friends who live in Beirut, Lebanon, and they're doing ministry work there. Like, they go and try to start businesses and use that to basically create a level of influence to share the gospel. Like, that's what they do. Like, they're Christian. Um, but thinking about them right now and that whole context of war, and then everything you have going on with, Russia, Ukraine, and even Georgia, Russian Georgia, like that's not talked about as much. But a lot of these big conflicting sets of cultures, but really it comes down to like a few key men who are upset at each other, doing some stupid things, men and women. And then, we send our young children to die for our own arguments. But I'm thinking about like, if I could, I really do believe if I could meet like, maybe not everyone, because some people are just like maybe pure evil, but I really do have like this naive hope and belief that if I was to sit down with Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, and we could just go around the circle. Where did you grow up? Boom, 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 boom. Okay, well, tell us about your family. Do you have siblings? And it reminds everybody, I think, first, it would remind everyone, like, okay, we were all human. We were all baby. We were all held at 6 months of age by our mothers. And there's nothing that our mothers wanted more than to just love us. If we had, like, those levels of just establishing that we are all human first, I think it could do so much for the world. Because I think about when I married into my wife's family, her uncle, he's actually his cousin, her cousin, but we call him Uncle Carl. He was the only American to be inside of Rwanda in the 1990s during that genocide. Everybody left, and he stayed there for his own reasons. And he's got these amazing stories where people that were living next to each other, the Hutu and the Tutsi, overnight some stuff happened, and one guy the next day, or whoever, like these groups of people, one went after the other, and like they're killing their neighbors. People that like kids got married, and they were their neighbors that they were sharing meals with. And I'm just reminded of like, wow, like if we could establish a human connection, a lot can be saved. But the further we demonize each other, the easier it's going to be to like tap into the deepest, darkest, just inhumane pieces of who we are. Because if we can write somebody off as the other, or as like a dog or an animal, it's much easier to squash a bug than it is a human. So all you have to do is make people believe that they're not human. And sadly, that's easy to do. Like,
yep. Yeah,
yeah.
You're spot on. I think if you can take them away from the teleprompter, and what they're being told to speak, and actually sit them down and be like, and like you said, just dive into like, who are you? I think for some of them, it might take a while to open them up a little bit, because that's just, they're so used to being that figure, and that train of thought, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can go down. That's a whole other world of just like, this profiling people of like that's who they are, it's like, that's how they grew up that way because of, their lifestyle and just the world they grew up in. Sure. Yeah. But also when it comes down to it, we all look at the stars the same. We all look at the mountains and we all see that that's beautiful,
Yeah.
So that doesn't, the only thing that's making us different is how we grew up, but it doesn't mean we have to hate each other because someone else said so,
Yeah.
To me, like I'm a big proponent of this is psychedelics. And I think with therapy, at least, it can really open up people and really see that like, oh, we are kind of like all one, we are all, we are all just like one collective. We don't know what we're doing here and why, but making it up as we go.
Sure.
But in the end, we're all one. We're all going to end up in the ground, so it doesn't matter how
we're
much
all
money
just a whisper. Yeah. A
Yep.
whisper in time, a blink in time.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Good deal, man. Well, I do have to go, unfortunately, but I just want to say thank you so much for diving in and allowing me to ask some of these questions. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, so that was exciting. But I would love to have you on again sometime. Yeah.
That was great. It was a great conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Really.
So I do want to ask you actually for closing to a little piece of advice that maybe you could give us just based on your experience. It seems like you have a level of comfortable, like you are comfortable being vulnerable. So if people want to start to learn how to be more vulnerable with each other in their relationships and just the interactions that they have, what do you think is something that we could do to further that ability to grow in vulnerability?
Um, I think one quote that I love that I always stick with is, when you can control your emotions, you can control your life.
Hmm.
I think we're all so just like reactive to things. And I think when you can actually sit back, one, listen, I think just listening to people and having understanding and empathy, like, and not being so reactive, you can actually like embrace it and not connect. You don't even have to attach to it, but just listening and yeah,
Listening.
control your emotions, not be so reactive.
Yeah. Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Sweet, dude. Yeah. So just full transparency. I mentally am all over the place. Usually there is a little bit more of a distinct flow with this stuff, but I was all over the place and you did great. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
working with me and allowing it just to kind of flow.
Yeah.
I
I wasn't sure
appreciate
where
it.
it'd go, but I was like, hey, we're going. Let's do it. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
I do like, I mean, because I know you interview a lot of, you know, athletes, and for the most part, and a lot of them are in triathlon space. I was like, oh, I wonder if it'll just be about that. But I also listening to your other podcasts, no, it wasn't just straightforward of like, oh,
yeah.
yeah, let's talk about this race. Let's talk about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Deeper. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I thought it was great.
Thanks, man. Awesome. Yeah, well, I appreciate it. This is episode 90. Oh, let me look really quick and I'll tell you. That way we can plan a little bit. So this is going to be episode 94.
Okay.
It'll come out in 20 days, which is a little far, but I've had to get ahead because I'm moving in 2 weeks, and like I'm gonna go 2.5 weeks probably without recording because it's just gonna be wild world trying to figure out where we're gonna live. We got an Airbnb in California we're gonna show up at and try to find a place in a week and a half. So
Oh,
it's gonna
so
be a little crazy.
you guys are just going and
Yeah,
just
we're just. I figured that's the best way to do it. I mean, because we went. What happened was my wife and I we visited Bend, Oregon for a job. They flew us out there. Thank you so much to Kenny for coming on the podcast and for sharing so much about his life and going deep with me on so many topics. When asking him in the end, like how to be vulnerable, basically he was saying, learn how to control your emotions and don't be too reactive. I think that's some really good wisdom that we can all take to the bank and hopefully continue to grow in this crazy but beautiful world that we do live in. If you made it to this point in the podcast, though, just want to say thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. If you are watching or listening on any of the platforms that allow you to like, comment, subscribe, review, any and all of the things can help to continue grow this podcast. So I just thank you so much for doing all of those things. I will catch you in the next one, and thank you again.